Hello, everyone, and welcome to the January 2022 LMS Transformation Town Hall. We're glad you can be here today to celebrate our recent winter go live on Brew and Learn and to hear more about what is to come with the transformation. My name is Lucy Avatisian, and I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor and CIO here at UCLA and one of the program owners for the LMS transformation. Next, we'll take a look at some general housekeeping items before getting to the agenda. Feel free to submit questions via the Q&A feature in Zoom. Questions will be answered live at the end of today's town hall, and a copy of this presentation deck and recording of this town hall will also be available on the LMS Transformation website following the meeting. Today, we'll take a look at the program status and review key accomplishments, outcomes, and what to expect in the coming months. Next, we'll cover common areas of support that have come up over the last couple of weeks and look at resources available for various Brew and Learn needs. We'll take a look at how Brew and Learn was able to support the remote teaching and learning start to the winter quarter. And lastly, we'll take some time to get your feedback regarding Brew and Learn and the LMS transformation. Next, I will turn it over to Carly to cover the program status.
Thank you, Lucy. And we can head right into the next slide here. Hi, everyone. I'm Carly Himmelman. I'm one of the project managers on the LMS transformation program. If we take a look at our roadmap here, following the winter quarter go live, which happened just a few short weeks ago, we're now continuing with the additional implementation of LTIs, along with winter hypercare for faculty, staff, and students who are live in Brew and Learn. On the horizon, we have our upcoming spring, summer, and fall go lives, bringing additional parts of campus live into Brew and Learn, and we'll continue with hypercare and additional LTI implementations throughout this time. As we take a look back at the past year, including the summer pilot, fall pilot, and winter go live, we'd like to review our guiding principles for the LMS transformation and look at some key accomplishments for the program. As you can see, our guiding principles are on the left: prioritizing pedagogy, emphasizing experience, cultivating community and culture, infusing continuous innovation, and considering cross-functional scalability. I wanted to highlight some of the accomplishments that this program successfully implemented over the last several months. We had a kickoff for this program back in March. Again, we had a fall pilot. We've implemented several LTIs or ed tech tools. We've implemented many trainings and resources to aid in a smoother user experience. We have prepared course migration and some of the courses that were excluded from Brew and Learn ahead of our go live. We held in-person engagement sessions called Brew and Learn Days, and we provided resources ahead of the winter go live, again, including office hours and remote instruction learning documentation ahead of the transition to remote instruction just a few weeks ago. We'd like to also share some outcomes from the winter go live. If you take a look on the left-hand side, there were roughly 2,200 course sites, over 2,100 faculty that were engaged, and almost 40,000 total users in Brew and Learn. There were over 100 knowledge-based articles, 35 or more ed tech tools, and we held office hours for faculty and staff over the course of the last several months, including up to 50 sessions. And throughout this process, we've documented a number of ways that we're going to continue to make improvements to the platform and this program. We've learned that Brew and Days were successful in terms of in-person and synchronous events. We're going to continue to develop platform functionality, especially based on some of the feedback that we've heard more recently around LTIs, grade passback, TA site usability, Brew and Learn accessibility, and other support tools. We're working on our Wave 2 communication strategy, which are the 5 additional schools that will be transitioning this coming fall. We're also going to offer more peer support and training to enable more assistance and more training for our users as they are learning the platform. We're also going to continue to gather feedback to learn how we can make further enhancements to the platform. And we're also launching the LMS Center of Excellence, which is our central resource hub for all aspects of Brew and Learn to better support items like support, troubleshooting, and suggestions. And if we take a deeper dive into really what's next in terms of upcoming goals, again, we are looking to implement additional EdTech or LTI tools, provide additional training sessions, and really focus on the Wave 2 Go Live, which includes the schools listed here, as well as dentistry. For upcoming activities, we'll have additional office hours and training sessions. We'll also be hosting additional Brew and Learn days, and we encourage you to stay informed by visiting the LMS Transformation website, which has a wealth of other resources. And again, we just wanted to highlight the number of EdTech tools that have been integrated in the platform. You'll see this list here on the left, and a few of the more popular tools that we have been working with faculty and others on, including H5P, Kaltura, and Piazza. We also encourage you to visit the LMS Transformation website. There's an LTI tool page where you can see the latest status for each of these tools and where they are within the approval process and implementation process. I'll now turn it over to Kate Schaller with the academic team, who will take a look at the common areas of support across the transformation.
Thanks so much, Carly. We can jump ahead to the next slide. So as this slide shows, we've been seeing some similarities in the tickets we've received through our support email, and they fall into a few different categories. In terms of questions about Brew and Learn functionality, people have been asking about Canvas calendar appointment slots, how students are able to message each other within Brew and Learn, how to publish your course, and how to see enrollments in the people section of your course. Some common technical questions we've gotten are how to create TA sites, how to migrate content and templates, how to use design tools in Brew and Learn, how to use quizzes, how to set up and grade assignments, and how to use the gradebook functions. And some LTI questions have been in regards to iClicker functionality, how to authorize your Zoom account in Brew and Learn, and questions about the Kaltura integration. We can go to the next slide. Thanks. And we have numerous ways to support you with these questions. You all have AULs, peers, and local support in your own units who are a wonderful resource and are working very hard to help you with all your questions. And here are also some ways that the program team is supporting you. First, through the Brew and Learn resources site, you can access and attend our daily office hours with instructional designers. We would love to see you there. You can also check out the knowledge base articles that we've written, and many of these address the questions on the previous slide. Brew and Learn resources also has self-paced training modules if you prefer that, as well as live trainings for you to access. I saw that there was just a question in the chat about that, so you can check that out. And you will also find information there about the next Brew and Learn days. And finally, there you can view Canvas community resources. And as we move forward, we will continue to integrate more LTIs, and also additional enhancements to Brew and Learn will address some of the aforementioned issues. Also, more user experience, just as we've all spent more time in Brew and Learn, will increase our knowledge of the platform. And additional knowledge base articles will continue to be produced in response to common questions that we receive. Also, to address some of your questions today, I'm going to cover a few of those topics right now, and those are the basics of setting up and grading assignments, gradebook functionality, and using the Kaltura integration for video content. Next slide, please. Oh, can we jump to the next slide?
Looks like maybe our slide person is
Here, he's logging back in now.
All right, great. I'll get set up to do it if we don't have to do it.
Okay, but I'm not seeing anything.
It's because Kyle got booted off.
Okay, great. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry. Okay, so first I'm just going to talk through how to set up a basic assignment in Brew and Learn. And you have lots of options when you're setting up your assignments. there's so much functionality. At first glance, it might be a little bit overwhelming, but here are just some key things that you'll definitely want to think about when you're creating or editing an assignment. Yeah, thank you very much for your patience. So after you enter in your assignment title and description that comes before what we're looking at here on these screenshots, the first thing that you'll want to do is enter in the number of points that the assignment is worth. Maybe the default is 10, I think, but this could be 0 if your assignment's ungraded, but it can be as many points as you like. The next thing that you'll want to think about is submission type. And for a pretty basic assignment setup, I think that you'll probably be using online or no submission. If you want your students to submit the assignment through Brew and Learn, you'll choose online from that drop-down menu, and that's what's shown in the screenshot here. With online submissions, you can decide what format the submissions come in via these checkboxes. And again, I think the two that are checked here are likely used the most frequently. Text entry means that the students will see a text box when they go in to submit the assignment, and they'll just type everything in there. And file uploads means that the students will upload some kind of file, a Word doc, a PDF, most any kind of file. And you can restrict that file type further with the checkbox that comes below that says restrict upload file types. And then no submission is a submission type that you might use, for instance, if you have students giving in-class presentations or maybe some kind of performance, but the students won't be submitting anything to Brew and Learn. It will still create a grade item in the grade book though. And then the last thing that you'll see on the second screenshot that you want to set up in your assignment is in the assign field. And this is where you will set a due date for the assignment. That's something that we really recommend because due dates put the assignment into both your and your students' calendars, and they will have them show up on kind of the right side of your course's homepage as they're coming up. And they also show up in this to-do section on your students' course homepage, which is handy for them. And as you'll see below, you can also set dates in the available from and until fields. These set kind of parameters on an assignment, so it's only viewable and submittable within that date range. I would say that this might be a good thing if you're using an assignment as a midterm. That's a good use of these dates. You could set kind of a small, narrow range of dates for your student to work on that assignment, for instance. We could move on to the next slide. So this next slide shows the grading platform that you'll use to grade your assignments, as well as your quizzes and discussions in Brew and Learn, and that's called SpeedGrader. What we're seeing here is an example of a student who's uploaded a document as an assignment. So we see that in SpeedGrader's document viewer. That has a number of commenting options where you can comment directly onto the document. You can highlight text as we see here. You can put markers on the document and type directly onto it, and students receive all of that feedback. Note that the marker tools do not show up if students have submitted an assignment via text entry, only with the document submission. But regardless of whether students submit a document or text, you will still have the options that we see on the right side of SpeedGrader. You give the student the number of points that they get out of whatever it is, and then you can add written comments. You can also attach additional types of comments with these icons that come below. You can upload files. You could submit a media comment if you like to give some kind of face-to-face interaction, and you can use a speech to text, which is nice. Can we get the next slide, please? And this is where the grades will end up after SpeedGrader, the Brew and Learn gradebook. We see all of our students' names. These are fake students, don't worry, in the column on the left, and all the graded items across the top. And of course, your students' gradebooks will look different. They will only see a table with their own grades. When you've finished grading an assignment in SpeedGrader, you will see the grades entered into the appropriate column in your Brew and Learn gradebook, like we see under assignment 1 on the far left. And I want to point out a couple things to manage your gradebook. If you have a ton of students, which some classes do, you can adjust your view of the gradebook under view on the far left. Here you could filter the gradebook by section. You could also filter by assignment group. That will make a large gradebook kind of easier to look at. Additionally, if you take a look at the gear icon that's on the top right, you can set things like adding automatic zeros to the gradebook for missing assignments. And there you can also set your gradebook to set your grades to be manually posted, meaning that you choose when they are released to students or automatically posted. And that's the default setting. And lastly, while we're here, I want to mention that grade pass back for final grades from Brew and Learn to MyUCLA will be available by the end of the quarter. And now we can move on to the next slide. Thanks. And the last thing I want to talk about today is using Kaltura for your video content in Brew and Learn. Maybe you already do. But you can use Kaltura by uploading videos into My Media, which you see on the left, or the Media Gallery, which will be viewable to your class. And then you can embed a video directly into a page with Kaltura by clicking that kind of rainbow wheel Kaltura icon. And this will bring up a window with all of your video content. That includes any Zoom meetings that you've recorded to the cloud. So that's quite handy. There you just click embed, the video appears in your page as it does here in this example. And you can also use the Kaltura button to record new video. And why we recommend using Kaltura is for one, there's just more storage space than simply uploading video content into your files section. But secondly, Kaltura is accessible. It's small maybe, but you see on this video screenshot that this video has captioning, which Kaltura provides, and it provides a transcript as well. So this is the most accessible option for both you and for your students. Next slide, please. So that was lots of stuff. I'm sure you have more questions about this or other things that we can help you with in your specific course. So I just want to point out a few resources. You can always access this help menu on any Brew and Learn page. It will take you to Brew and Learn resources and also links out to Canvas support and Canvas guides. But also for more hands-on support, you can come to one of our workshops. You can access those through Brew and Learn resources. In fact, I'm holding one this afternoon at 1 on assignments and grading. So if you want to hear more about that, you can join me. And you can always join us for our daily office hours. We're very happy to talk to you about any questions you have about Brew and Learn, about your course. And if you have a bigger question or really any kind of question, and you'd like to schedule a consult with a designer on our project, you email us, please, at this email that's right here, brewandlearnsupport@it.ucla.edu. We're really glad to work with you. Thanks so much. And I will turn it over to Mark Kaiser on the academic team to talk about remote learning.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Mark Kaiser. I'm an instructional design manager for the LMS transformation. I only have one slide, and I'm just going to catch you up on what we did during the winter break to prepare for remote learning. So as you can see on this slide, part of what we did was a communication strategy to deans, faculty, academic units, and students to highlight what's available to support remote learning in Brew and Learn. We also doubled our office hours that we had. So we had morning and afternoon office hours with instructional designers and our team of grad students. And that was really well attended. And so we're happy to have you at office hours again if you have questions for us. And finally, we created a plethora of remote learning guides to support your transition to Brew and Learn. And if there are any questions, it was a very short slide. And if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'm happy to answer them. And I also want to underline that, as Kate was saying, we're here. So if you email us, you can have your questions matched with a designer and hopefully have a consultation or an office hour to answer your questions. Also, if you look at the screen, the Brew and Learn resources site shows where you can find some of these resources. So if you're wondering, can I see these resources that we created, just head on over to that Brew and Learn resources site and you should be able to find them all there. I think that's all I have to say about the support of remote learning. So it's a very short slide, but please hit us with your questions and we're happy to help you. Thanks for your time. This goes over to Jeff now.
Thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. My name is Jeff Burke. I'm a professor in theater, film, and television and special assistant to the ECP for the transformation and one of the program owners with Lucy. And so we wanted to use this time to gather and do our best, at least, to answer feedback. We are always interested, and I want to correct the slide. You can send emails to lmstransformation@itucla.edu, but please also send technical issues, questions to Brew and Learn support at IT, and we'll put the link in the chat a little bit. There is a Slack channel. There are governance meetings where there's representation from faculty and staff across campus that we would encourage you to participate in. And right now, and we're looking at other ways to provide support and training, but right now we wanted to spend most of the time today just hearing from you. So we can go to the next slide. And we have some specific questions that would be very helpful. And I think Kyle's going to open a poll on this one in particular. We would love to hear in the either in the Q&A or in the chat things that you would like to see training for. And we put a few up in the poll that we're thinking about. LTIs, just as a reminder, are the plugins like Kaltura or Zoom support, Piazza, so on, that are available. And so we're planning to provide more trainings, but would like to know if that's something that faculty in particular across campus are interested in, or if there are other things. So we'll take a moment to collect collect your questions and thoughts here, and then we'll go on. And if you have other things you want to know, feel free to throw those in the Q&A and we'll get to them, including some that were kind of partially answered previously. Kyle, I think you'll have to decide when it's time to close the poll, since I can't see responses.
Yeah, no problem. We'll give it just another couple seconds.
Okay.
All right, let's go ahead and close that poll.
Okay, so we can go to the next slide. Sort of even, well, I guess while we're here for a second, just looking at the responses, most of the respondents were interested in LTIs and assignments. And we can publish the results, I think, as we go, but pretty even interest across. And thanks for the question in the Q&A. So I'll read it out loud, and Ava or somebody else wants to answer this, that would be great. And a useful training topic in the other category might be the difference between Brew and Learn, Canvas, and CCLE Moodle. I can try to answer verbally. We'll see what Ava says. That generally this is something that is covered in some of the foundations, introductions to Canvas in office hours. Kind of depends on the specific differences that people are interested in hearing. I think what would be helpful for us and relates to a question that came up a little bit earlier is differences in what area or what type of functionality. And it might be easier to have a focus session on a particular area of functionality rather than trying to cover all the differences necessarily. So if folks can share with us either through the email addresses that were provided or even today, specific areas of interest. Quizzes is one that comes up a lot, but let us know, and certainly we could plan specific short trainings on that as well. We'll see what Ava says. We can go to the second question while she's answering that. Something else that we would like to know is what method or medium is working best for those of you that have gone to training or have faculty that you work with who have participated in the trainings. We've taken feedback already in terms of how long they last and what they cover. And we have a few that are up there now. Please go ahead and answer the poll if you're interested. It'd be great information for us to have. Mike, I see your question or your input coming shortly in the chat, and so we'll take a second to cover that. All right, Kyle, let us know when we are ready.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and close now. Thank you, everyone, for responding.
Great. So I will put to answer, or actually, if somebody else on the Zoom can put into the chat the link for Brew and Learn resources and answer the Q&A with that, that'd be great. All right, so in-person tutorials, definitely the favorite, and that's been our understanding as well. Love to get some information on the other formats that people would like. All right, let's go to the third question. Mike, we'll come back to the Canvas to Moodle differences and try to handle those all together at the end after you've got them in there. So this is a general question, which is how effective is the current support model for faculty, staff, and students and TAs as well. And so what we mean by that is there's a mix of local support. We know the department, within most departments and units, there are local support that are answering your questions and providing a lot of initial assistance to faculty. And then there is central support. That is the group that's presenting this particular town hall. and then support from the platform provider as well. So I see the comment from Raphael that the current support model is confusing and frustrating. So if you can elaborate, we can talk a bit more about it. Or if you have some offline comments to share, I would love to hear them. You can email me directly if it makes more sense than sending it to the Brew and Learn support address if that's one of the things that you want to talk about. And so I think Kaltura is actually a good example. So I think for things that are where the campus approach is still evolving and exactly who should provide support for the various plugins and in what way is something that's still being determined. So I think that is something we're aware of. It's really nice to hear that. We are also hearing, let's see, okay, so, and then maybe we'll go back to some of these questions about Moodle Canvas differences at the end. And then another thing that we've heard sort of along the same lines is to try to improve responsiveness of the 24/7 chat around UCLA specific issues. And so we have those types of feedback already and are working on them. Any other comments on the support model would be welcome. And even questions about what we mean by that. So we can keep going on to the next question, and you can always return to these topics in the Q&A. So this is a question about how effective and useful you have found the staff. And I think the most helpful thing for us is to know what works and what doesn't work in as specific terms as possible. And so I think I would ask if you do have thoughts about the staff responsiveness to questions or the types of trainings that are being provided, and I'd be happy to receive those individually, or we could talk about them here. It'd be great to get specifics. That's kind of a key piece of input for us. So I'll give that one a second. I'm gonna check with the last. All right, we can go to the next question. So happy to get these as we go. All right. So topics for future town halls. We can put this in. You can put this in the chat or in the Q&A system if that makes sense. I'd love to hear what you'd like us to do. And this goes to kind of things that staff are hearing repeatedly from faculty. We'd love to cover them here, specific features or things of interest. So why don't we now, while you're thinking about those, we'll go back to some of the questions that have been asked before. I wanted to go back to the cost question from the very beginning. So there's a question, we've gotten this a few times, about the cost of the Canvas platform. And so I don't want to misquote the budget here, but if you want to contact me offline, or if anybody's interested in that, I'm happy to sort of sit down and go through what the budget components are. I think something to remember is there's a mix of the platform itself that we pay for as a service, the campus pays as a service, and we get certain things in response for paying for it. We pay for the 24/7 support from Instructure that I think, despite some of the challenges around UCLA specific stuff, we found has been really useful for answering basic questions quickly, especially for students at any time. And then in addition to that, there's the team of people that are supporting it now, which is the cost of the transformation project. And then the plans for how it'll be supported in the future at the end of the project. So it's hard to, I'm hesitant to give a single number, even if I remembered it. It's more of a conversation about what the costs are, but I'm happy to talk. I don't know, Lucy, if you want to say anything differently, but it's really sort of a sit down conversation to review the budgets and kind of compare to our understanding of CCLE costs and the trade-offs that we have. All right, so now to go through the questions. So maybe to start with some of the Moodle to Canvas questions, and I'll have to ask Ava if you can try to answer a few of these, Ava or Mark. So if we go back to the start, Mike's question was about quizzes. Moodle had a setting that allowed multiple guesses for partial credit. Is that something that we know whether it's possible in old or new quizzes, or we have to look into and get back to those?
I'll speak briefly about it. Hi again. So I don't if I understand what Mike is imagining here, there is not an exact parity for that kind of take a quiz and then get a slightly different score and take a quiz. And so, like, there's a couple ways in Moodle you can get a little more granularity with how you take multiple attempts. And I'm not aware of a direct way to do that. We can certainly talk about a way of designing something that gets you a similar end result, but it won't be a 1-for-1, just click a box and now you're allowing, like, because Moodle had a thing where you could take a percentage off or like a decimal percentage off every time you took a quiz, so you'd lose 10% every time you got the wrong answer, that sort of thing. I'm not aware of an automatic way of doing that in Canvas. So I don't know if that's what Mike was imagining, but again, we can sort of discuss how to design for the same effect at the end, but there isn't a direct way like within the menus.
I think, thanks, Mark. So some of these might be best handled in an offline support conversation. I think something we should mention is the transition from old to new quizzes. Ava, do you want to explain, or Mark, if whatever's the easiest, that there are also different quiz types in Canvas, sometimes with different functionality. And we're sort of aware of a lot of comments around requested functionality in quizzes, and we are trying to communicate them to the folks that make Canvas. So we would love to hear these examples, even if they're not immediately correctable. But Mark or Ava, can you clarify just sort of old and new quizzes and where we are in what's currently recommended?
Right, so thank you. If a person, faculty or staff, wants to experiment with new quizzes, it's on, but it's not the default, if that makes sense. So you have to opt in to experiment with it. And the reason that we're recommending that as a starting place is it's not backwards compatible. So if you were to default opt everyone into new quizzes, you can't go backwards to old quizzes. But if you build your test banks in old quizzes, they're called classic, and then you say, well, I'd like to try new quizzes now, I like it, you can import those into the new quizzes. And there's, maybe you have to do a little bit of cleanup if there's something edge case about it, but in my experience, it's fine going forwards, but there is no way to go backwards. So that's the reason, starting with the default opt-in situation. If anyone has like a use case, hey, can I do this with my quizzes? Please open a ticket with us. We're happy to assign a designer and have a consultation with you and talk through your particular case. I think we can, I say, get the same kind of educational effect. It might not look exactly the same or have exactly the same levers to pull, but I think you'll end up getting something, functionally the same. I don't know if that answers your question, Jeff. Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to get it. The second question from Mike was about scheduling modules. So I see we can schedule modules, but not individual items like a lecture. Quizzes and assignments are fine, but why not each and every item?
Yeah, I wasn't sure what he meant by schedule, and there's so much chatting now that I couldn't get back to him. But anything that is an assignment or a page can have a due date assigned to it. So if that's what he meant by scheduling, you can have a due date. And I really want to underline what Kate said about due dates. If you use that parameter of a due date on a page or an assignment or a quiz or a discussion, what have you, it populates all over your Canvas site. It'll show up in the syllabus, it'll show up on the to-do list, it'll automatically go on the calendar. So there's a lot of functionality about using the due dates that was not true in Moodle CCLE. So just that's a shift in mindset about building from the due dates. So I don't know if that's what Mike meant. But again, please come talk with us. We're happy to look at your particular site and answer your questions there.
Thanks, Mark. And then the last one, just to go through the three from Mike, was about CAE accommodations to provide extra time. And I know this is something that the instructional designers have been working on with folks. And so if you want to address that briefly, that'd be great. I know there might be a longer conversation there.
Right. This is one of those sort of like changing systems pain points sort of things. If you're using classic quizzes, it's a line by line updating of a student with an accommodation. You have to go in and give them that manual accommodation. There is supposedly a process of doing that in a batch for the quizzes next or the new quizzes. I haven't personally had the opportunity to experiment with that very much, but again, that's one of those things where we're happy to sit down with you. We'll make an experimental site and we'll put some of our dummy students in there, and we can, you and I, like whoever the person is that we'll both play with it, and you say, yep, that feels good, I like how that works, or nope, that's worse. I'll stick with classic. So we're happy to sort of experiment with you and figure out what makes sense. Hopefully that answers your question about accommodations.
Thanks, Mark. So I'm going to try to pick through the chat here a little bit. There was a note from Raphael about not getting information on what LTIs do that happened automatically in Moodle. There is a pretty good document. I'm going to paste a link in the chat. I apologize. This probably requires you to log in, although maybe not actually. And this was an activity transition guide that reviews common activities in CCLE at a high level and how to achieve them in Canvas. And I think it's pretty useful for seeing some of that mapping. It doesn't always cover the details of every type of activity, of course. And so we are working on ways, and this was a question in the Q&A, of how to capture some of the type of knowledge and approach that Mark was describing at a more granular level and share it with the community. One of the challenges is the other feedback that we're often getting is there's too much information and we should streamline the amount of information present. So I think there is a lot of knowledge on how to transition CCLE activities at different granularity. And sometimes the best way to start with that is a consultation for now, and then we are looking at how to get that documented in a way that people can find it and use it. But I find the transition guide, at least as a high level, was useful for some of that. It'd be great to get feedback on that document. And then in terms of cases where the staff have been learning things, we're working on that too. I think both in terms of obviously the whole team and the whole campus is coming up to speed. But anywhere that you see gaps in training, we're happy to. And if you're staff on the call, we're happy to provide targeted training or get you looped into things in particular areas where you feel like you have faculty interest but you don't necessarily know how to respond to it. And I think also I should mention, we have a network of graduate students that have been supporting the project to answer questions. And we would love to find ways to connect them to graduate students across the campus that are working in support roles or as TAs to kind of have a peer network at that level as well. All right, and so kind of going through the rest, see if there are other questions here. Let's see, Ava answered the question about will Instructure do what we asked them? And I think, I don't know how she answered it. I'm just looking to see, because it's a good question. So Instructure, that they are using Canvas to support, they are selling Canvas to support many universities and colleges and other educational institutions. And so like anything else, the feedback is limited and it takes a different path to get something done, just like it might in Microsoft Word or Google Docs or whatever. And that's one of the trade-offs for having a software as a service that is providing us some other benefits that we've talked about in previous town halls. And we can go over again the motivations for the transition, but at the same time, we've met with Instructure at an executive level and expressed an interest to have a close dialogue with them about features. I know the rest of the UC campuses are similarly interested. R1 universities also quite interested in that. And when we met with them, a few of the things that have come up, so questions around methods for assessment in particular, and what can be done in the platform to make sort of faculty content creation and faculty lives easier, they are interested in. Those are some of the things that they're focusing on. So we do want to get feedback about fundamental updates to the platform and try to take them into those conversations with them, again, as specific as we can be, and and see how well we can do at getting the voices from campus represented in the product. So it's definitely not something where we're just going to wait and see what they do. We're trying to figure out the best long-term relationship to have with them and get feedback. All right, so we can go on. I think there is no more structured slide here, but there is something about feedback opportunities. We can go to the next slide. So just to recap again, some of the things that are, some of the mechanisms that are available for feedback. And please, use them. If you like Slack, go there and people will answer your questions quickly. But there's also, of course, the support chat, emails to either the LMS transformation address or directly to the Brew and Learn support team. And with that, we'll just wait a bit and see if you have other questions, either for folks that are here that didn't come up. I know there was a comment from Sarah about continuity with CCLE and Moodle. And again, if there are specific things that you can tell us in terms of continuity, we'd love to understand what they are and see how we can support you where you find that there's a big discontinuity in the way of working. So we'll leave it open for a second here, see what other questions come up. Or if there's anything that we answered too quickly in the Q&A earlier, but I hope we got most of those. Okay, so someone mentioned that I found Canvas slower than CCLE when I tried to switch between files, and I was told that this was because many people are using the system at the same time. I don't know. So it would be really useful to get us kind of a specific report of when you experienced that, because there have been a few cases where the performance of the platform was degraded. And so it'd be good to know when actually specifically the days and times. And if it happens all the time, and then we would probably want to meet with you, see if we can figure out specifically what's going on. We've had a few reports of that, and it seems to perhaps be related to either browser connection, things that there may be other ways to fix, but it would be great to find out more. So I was going to say there were specific sort of dates where there had been degraded performance that was resolved. The idea that there are more users on the system than there might be in CCLE may or may not be the case, but this is again a software service that's scaled across universities and other educational institutions across the country. And so generally they're set up to handle the scale of users, and you shouldn't be seeing responsiveness issues in normal times. And so if you can let us know when and how you experienced them, it'd be great to run them down and figure out what the issues were. We'll keep this open for a little bit longer.
I'll also add one more piece of context to that question about files. And this sort of goes back to what Kate was saying about using culture or not using culture. I think that Canvas is good at some things, but it's not a media hosting platform. So like if you were trying to stream a video, for example, off of Canvas, that's not going to have the best performance. Whereas if you're using an actual video platform that's meant to stream the media, and again, I don't know what files that particular person was using, they didn't mention it. If it was just like flicking through their pages, or if they were actually trying to maybe play something off of a page, that might also account for that. But again, a lot of these questions, we need to have like the more context to understand what might be the issue. Right.
Found the Canvas Corporation support was incomprehensible. So the short answer is yes, there will always be local support. And that we are working with Canvas to do a better job of fielding UCLA specific questions or knowing when to hand off Canvas questions to the local team. So I've had, my own set of interactions with chat that range from like being incredibly helpful on like simple Canvas related questions, to then sort of getting to things that I probably should have just reached out to Mark or the ID team that were more connected to teaching, for example. And so, you know, what I would suggest is if you find the Canvas support not helpful, just contact the team directly and ask the question there. But we are working on improving it, sort of improving both their handling of questions that they're getting from us, how to hand it off to our support team, and just generally trying to make that work as well as we can. But yes, there'll always be local support, both centrally, and we'll continue to train and support local IT in supporting the platform as well. So yes, absolutely. And if you have particular, you know, instances of incomprehensibility and you'd like to share them, I'd be happy to get those. You can just send those to me directly, I suppose, instead of the support team, and then we'll figure out the best ways to follow up. But it's good information also for Instructure, and we do pay for a service contract, and we are expecting them to try to improve it as they get to know the way the campus is going to use it over time.
Oh, I didn't realize that, Guy. Sorry. I thought the questions and answers were showing up for you as well. Maybe if you click the,
sorry. Okay.
yeah, it might be that you have to click the Q&A button to see the questions. They don't pop up on the screen. But that last question was about, as you maybe noticed from the context, opening up tickets with Canvas support directly. One thing I'll add about that, and I know as an end user it might not be obvious, but if it's a tool that is outside of Canvas, in other words, where it's a different vendor, they typically are less, they can answer questions about it, but they're not the primary owner of that tool. So then it becomes harder for them to understand. And so, like, for example, some of the people that have gotten lost in cul-de-sacs is they'll say, I have a problem with my video. And it's like, well, is it a video that Canvas is hosting, or is it a video that Cultura is hosting, or is it a video that YouTube's hosting? And so there's a little bit of runaround trying to figure out who actually is the owner of that video so we can answer it. And I realize that's frustrating as the person asking that question, that's frustrating, but just to give you some context of why sometimes Canvas support can answer your question.
Yeah, and I realized that, thanks, Guy, I realized that the Q&A is not visible, which I didn't realize. So I apologize for not reading the question. The last one was that I found Canvas Corporation support to be incomprehensible. Are we going to have local Bruin support as long as Canvas is in our system? Is our system? All right. We have a few minutes left. We'll leave it open here and see if there are other questions. All right. Thanks, everyone. So I encourage you again. Okay, so now, sorry, we'll leave this open for a little bit. So now you should be able to see the Q&A. Sorry that it wasn't there before. I wouldn't have spoke over them so quickly. So we'll leave the call open till noon if you want to browse through those. All right, so there are a few more questions here. So again, I would love to maybe have a specific conversation around the questions that you were asking where you didn't get helpful help, at least from Canvas phone support or the chat. If you want to share that here, that would be great. Otherwise, if you want to let us know, we can work on improving that, or at least get them directing it to the right place. Okay, so we have gotten this last question in the Q&A about why do the transition and why do the transition now? And you know, this is something that we have covered in previous town halls fairly extensively. And I think maybe the best way to talk through it is in an offline conversation. If you want to go through kind of the origin story, the decision and sort of the timing, I think the basic story, if I can reconstruct it without my notes, was that the campus had convened a steering committee on online teaching and learning that was one of several different issues that had, or several different sort of efforts, not just looking at online teaching, but online support for teaching in general, so covering the LMS. And part of that process and the things that led up to that involved reviewing whether CCLE was the appropriate platform to kind of continue into the future. And there were a number of reasons that the consensus had been to move to Canvas. And in fact, I think they had reviewed a number of LMSs at the time, including Moodle, and also Canvas and others, and come to that conclusion, I think several years ago now, in my understanding. And at that time, made a decision to transition, and that transition was delayed. And the general feeling, even when we looked at this at the beginning, sort of in the pandemic, was that the transition couldn't be delayed any longer for a number of different reasons that, like I said, we have covered before, that have to do with sort of student experience, sort of functionality, and the available functionality to support teaching at UCLA in the long term, which doesn't mean it isn't different than CCLE or doesn't have challenges in the transition, and a number of other things that we can talk about. We can certainly do this again at the beginning of the next town hall, is kind of go back through some of the original reasons, or it wasn't seen as it's not an unnecessary, arbitrary, or externally imposed change. It was an internally motivated change that came from faculty in consultation with the administration, that then generated the plan that sort of put us on the path. And I think if you look at the number of institutions at the R1 level and across many different sizes of campuses, it's a common choice, and it's a common choice because they are a market leader. They do have the set of features that were deemed important to the campus. So that's sort of how we got here. As far as the transition to remote instruction, I think that's one that we all know was difficult and have been in the middle of as well. And we can talk more about the timing of that if it would be helpful, but I think there's no doubt it was a difficult time. I think the goal is to come out of it better prepared for different teaching modalities with support from the system. And so where it's not doing that, or where you're not seeing improvements, or, I think like Mark said, if you've spent 100 hours, we had reached out to the campus back, I think, I don't want to misquote the date, but, almost a year ago, saying that there are resources to support the transition and that can help in moving courses from Moodle to Canvas. And that's still the case, and will be the case through the end of the summer. And so at a minimum, I would say if you anticipate another 100 hours, or you have other courses that you need to move, or ones that have stayed on Moodle because they were an exception, or because they were a sequence course or exception or cluster course, and you're anticipating that kind of workload, please do reach out to us, and let's go through and see how we can help you in that transition. And I think the UCLA team wants to have the opportunity to try to make that transition as straightforward as we can, and to try to lower the amount of work that's being done to move the courses. So I know that's probably not a complete answer to the origin story, but I'm happy to talk through it if you want to contact me offline, or review some of the motivations and reasons that were on the transition. So I think I tried to answer, because Deloitte said this was a good idea question, is sort of the answer is no, right? This is an internally motivated, I don't know that I can remember the exact document or report, but no, this is an internally motivated change that came from faculty leadership in consultation with the administration, and doesn't mean it's not difficult or hasn't taken a ton of effort, and will continue to do that. But And that's sort of the best that I can give off the cuff on that. All right, any other questions?
Jeff, if I may just add a couple of things. So I looked back and this decision predates my arrival and Jeff's engagement with the project, but the decision was made back in 2019. And we kicked off the project last year. So, and there's more information on our website related to why and why now. And I tried to share one of the town hall decks, 7 and 8, pages 7 and 8 cover that. And we're happy to sit down and speak more about this. As it pertains to Deloitte's engagement, Deloitte wasn't even engaged until after we decided to move forward with the implementation. So this decision predates all of us.
And I did thanks, Lucy. And I did at some point look up and go through the sort of the original reports and recommendations to understand them. And I'm happy to see if I can find that again. Frankly, I've been so focused on the sort of getting the work done that I can't tell you the story off the top of my head, but happy to go through that. All right. Thanks for the shout out for the Ritzies. That's what we've heard as well. And in fact, the graduate students working with us are modeled after the Ritzie model in the humanities. So absolutely. I guess for those of you that don't know, the Ritzies, I don't know if I know the acronym, but are the graduate students providing research and instructional support in the humanities. All right, we have 2 minutes left. We might as well stay till the end. So if anybody has any last questions, feel free. All right, we're nearing the end. I'll fill the last 2 minutes by just thanking all the folks that presented, in particular, Kate and Mark and Ava for joining us to talk a bit more about the platform in detail, and Carly for recapping the progress so far. Thanks, everyone. So with
Thank
that,
you.
we will sign off.
Thank you.